Hello, my name is Jeremy Elder. I'm a staff product designer for the UX and front-end foundations team at GitLab. And this video is just a quick walkthrough of the redesign merge request widgets epic, specifically focused on the visual design piece, which I'm working on. There's a framework that I will review that is in process, and I will highlight some of the areas that we are requesting feedback on. So let's jump in. First off, here you can see the redesign merge request widgets epic. I won't spend time going through this. I'll provide links in the video notes that you can jump to any of these items. And specifically what I'm tackling is the visual design aspect of it. And the purpose of this is to create unity and a synchronicity between all of the merge request widgets. I'll jump in and explain more of that in a bit. But the scope of this involves the structure, iconography, actions, visual design, content. Lots of bullet points here that you can also explore. Async, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. So I'm going to jump over to Figma. Once again, this file will be linked, and this is where you'll be able to add most of your comments and feedback. A quick structure overview of the file, the cover with the explanation, link to the epic, the status is in progress. This was born out of an audit of all of the applicable MR widgets that we're covering, and also have reference for not included widgets. Once again, I'm going to skip at a high level through this file so that we don't have to make this longer than it needs to be. But you can, if you jump into this file, you'll see screenshots from different, I believe there's 9 different merge request widgets and different states, etc., of those that have been used in consideration for design updates. As part of the audit, there was a summary that Ian had put together, and you can review the notes and the synthesized action items as well. There's a design exploration area where I explored the items that were mentioned in the visual issue that covered off on these items. And this is just purely my exploration around spacing and structure and hierarchy, indentation, a few different options, iconography, status, etc. So at any point you need any background or want to go through the file and check any of these sections out, please do. Right. Jumping forward, components. As I was building out the framework, I started to also build in components so that any updates would propagate, don't have to go through and make changes to multiple instances. So try to make it easy on myself and anyone else. Also, just a precursor to future work where having this as a resource in Figma, anybody should be able to take these files, these components, and quickly spin up what a new or existing MR widget would look like in a variety of states, statuses, content, actions, etc. I'm going to skip over this framework for just a second. This is another reference file. In fact, I will just rename this reference as we speak here. There's some work ongoing for the merge request widget, which is not part of this audit. However, it's great for reference material and directionally contains some of the similar aspects that are being explored here. And lastly, there's a review exploration file. This is empty at the moment, or page, I should say. This is empty at the moment. And as part of the ask for providing your feedback, I've just created a space here, a page that if you need to explore anything on your own, take what exists and say, how might we, or I have this scenario, then you have a place to do that within the document for context. So we'll jump into the merge request widget framework. You start here, feedback request. What I would like feedback on is specifically anything in here. So that's not very specific, but you get the idea. Items that you like, don't like, or have questions about. Please just drop a pin on there. It's as easy as hitting the comment field or the C on the keyboard and just hitting that, dropping a comment. What I would ask that if you have suggestions or questions, concerns, please link to examples and fully explain reasoning or a background if necessary. Like I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to explore on your own, create a frame under that review exploration page. That would be a great place to do that. And lastly, if you need to invite others to this file, please ensure they only have view access unless they're already a paid seat under our Figma account. That way we can manage our licenses appropriately. Some of this. All right, so the framework, let me just zoom out really quick here. What you'll see in this document, in this page in particular, is a frame that covers the framework. And then there's some exploration or examples at different breakpoints. There are 5 different scenarios I've laid out here. I've taken existing merge request widgets, populated the content based on what was captured in the screenshots from the audit, put it in here, formatted it, and that way you should be able to have a quick example of what your merge request widget should look like or could look like under this framework. And that's a great opportunity for you to kind of kick the tires on that, test that out, and see what works and what doesn't work for you, what scenarios are missing, etc. All right, framework, here we go. All right, the framework, I'm just going to read this really quick. The merge request widget framework, it synchronizes a wide variety of MR widgets that serve many purposes. And so by systematizing attributes like layout, hierarchy, content regions, the goal is that the widgets will be more consistent, scannable, and utilitarian. Widgets should be better able to adapt to page layout, responsive, and then future widgets will have something to patterns to follow and to build on. And this framework provides constraints for possible and ultimately a widget's unique purpose should be should define the extent of how it's applied. The goal here is to systematize and make everything as universal as possible. However, I understand that there's going to be and are widgets that have specific functionality use cases that that may fall outside this, and so this should be ultimately used for a framework, but keep in mind that if something doesn't align, there is liberty to within reason to go outside of these bounds for a specific component when necessary. So the layout section here, you can take some time to read through this, but high level widget is more of a grid. Think of a paradigm of an inbox where you have a list of emails and you have the status of read and unread and starred, you have the subject, you have actions that you can take on these. This is a very similar paradigm in the merge request widget area where there's items where there's 3 levels to this, and there's a hierarchy, and there's a status and a subject and actions you can take. So in this grid layout, left column here, there are 3 levels. There's the parent level of the widget, which is always visible, level 2 and level 3, which are nested underneath, and we'll get into more of that in a bit. Also in Figma, these sections are linked if you just want to jump to them in the document for a quick reference. And then there are 3 content regions. So column-wise, we have the status, the subject, and actions. Level 3 doesn't have any related actions. Anything that's within a level 3 happens within the actual subject content, and you'll be able to see that through the examples. So you can go through that, cover that off. Grid. Grid has our base 8 scale from pajamas to align all of the elements within. So you can see a little legend here of how that works. If you have any questions, you can go to pajamas. And in fact, I'll make sure to update this with a link to pajamas to the spacing scale, where you can view that and see how that's applicable. Taking a look here at responsive, where the smaller viewports use a little bit of a reduced padding to hopefully get more text in there. There's a little bit of a balance, and you can feel free to weigh in on this, where reducing the content on a smaller device means that touch targets can be closer together. So think through that as you evaluate it and see what might be comfortable, or if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear that. Let's see, there's some information about the responsive. Overflow is TBD. And if you have any insight or work on a widget that has overflow, would love comments and feedback here. Right now there's a max height for the secondary or level 2 area. And within that, if it overflows, it scrolls. So we'll be building this out as we go and learn more. There's a section for hierarchy now. So start with the container. This is the item, the object that wraps 1 or more widgets. So it's a simple frame, etc. It's got the border, contains them. Level 1, the primary level. Level 2, secondary. There's a few options here based on the attributes that can be turned on and off in Figma. So referencing the component, you can see here, okay, it's a level 2. A full border means it's the first item. Any n+1, as mentioned in here, has an inset border. I'll show that in the examples, how that works. And so these are built out just to have different options and make it extremely easy to build with these and use them. Level 3, very similar, just have the options that are there. So that covers the levels as part of the hierarchy. Next is the content regions. There's 3 content regions. There's the status, the subject, and the actions. Broken down that way just to have a concise area that we can reference and talk about it. So if we say, this happens in the subject, we know where that content goes. If we're talking about the status level, it's easy, the actions, etc. The status itself, there's 3 levels. At level 1 is primary, and it has this highlight and this extra visual weight so that it provides more of a visual anchor and visual cue as someone is scanning through a merge request page. These are designed to be able to stand out more and highlight that actual parent level status that's based on the status of sub items when present. Level 2 to 3, general status. These apply to most MR widgets. Level 2 to 3, severity. So anything like security that has that uses a critical high medium scale, that's where these statuses can be present. Next up is the subject. Within the subject, there are description, title, the content, and meta information. So you can see here I've just included examples of different formatting. So there can be inline links, highlighted text, meta information that's a little smaller and lighter, a badge if there's like a system generated status, like there's a new item, etc., or if it's dismissed, something like that can be part of that. Here you can begin to see the indent and the purpose for that I mentioned above in level 2, where this is a nested item. It's another level 2 item, but this nesting helps tie it back to that parent. When everything has a border that's edge to edge, you tend to lose that hierarchy a bit and that relationship, because then you're just basing it solely on a background color. This helps to inset it and help with that hierarchy. And then lastly, for a content region, is the actions. And within that, I can update the little points here. It looks like they got off a little bit, but there's an info button, a download drop-down text link. Text link has actually been removed, so I will replace that. Tertiary button and an expand and collapse. From a component standpoint, built out the actions to account for everything that was visible in the audit. So if there was information, if there was downloads, if there were actions, expand, collapse, all those are counted for in here. So as you build out widgets and go through these are designed to be plug and play, turn them off, turn them on, etc. as needed. And then lastly, accessibility. The accessibility section is TBD once we button up the framework a little more. And the reason for that is because with that, I'm going to outline the roles, like the actual ARIA roles, keyboarding, content for screen readers, what I call the content behind the content. That will all be documented and outlined in here as well, so that during implementation, its development has a baseline from an accessibility standpoint as how to implement these, how these should be communicated and announced to users of screen readers and keyboard users. All right, the examples, I will zoom out really quick here. For the examples, like I mentioned, there are a few different layouts, and those just account for different points, different breakpoints in GitLab. So we have anything under 576, we have a 576 to 767, etc. And also I've accounted for the navigation in here. So if you were to go in here, double click on this nav right, you can see expanded is off. If I turn this on, you can see that this widget content responds to that at that breakpoint. The reason I wanted to include this is because you might design at a mobile layout, but then at a larger breakpoint, you actually have less space when the sidebar takes up that content space. And that's the case here, where, as you can see, this now becomes something that's more akin to mobile. So it's just a way to stress test this and understand that because we don't have container queries and we're relying on breakpoints right now, we want to make sure that all of those scenarios can be accounted for with the navigation. The fixed layout is, well, I apologize. I will jump back really quick here. And I know I'm going through this fast, so you can watch it at half speed if needed. But security and down, you'll see, are listed. I have an example of each widget that was covered off in the audit. There's an example of it in here in the expanded state, just to give a feel for how that content might look. And at the very end, just to combine, combination of how they might appear collapsed together. Not all of those, just a subset of them. At the smaller breakpoint, etc. Jump up to the next breakpoint. Same thing, just giving you an idea of how these work, how they function, how they reflow, where you can begin to see how some of the rules in the framework play out as far as truncation. And then if we go further, once again, the other layout, that now we have a different breakpoint, and so the additional padding is introduced, the truncation changes, and then up all the way to our fluid layout. So you can actually see, how will these work if you have a very large screen and actions might become far enough out in the peripheral. So that should cover just about anything and everything in here. Like I mentioned, I'll link to the files. The primary ask is that PMs, designers, anybody that has a stake in these merge request widgets, jump in and begin to comment and identify areas that work, that don't work, things that you like, that you don't like, things you have questions about. By all means, attach screenshots of edge cases that might not be covered under this review exploration. That way we can come back and reassess that. The goal would be to have a week timeline to capture feedback. From there, to go through that feedback, make any update to the framework and componentry in here as necessary, do solution validation, button up the framework, and then release it for development. If you have any questions, once again, please feel free to leave them in the epic and the issue. Thank you for letting me speed through this, and best of luck. Thanks for your time.